right? Disclaimers, racism, sexism, homophobia, towards the end a little bit, ageism has passed. Um, yeah, um, this kind of hit home a little bit, saying that, like, you're never gonna, people are gonna see their grandparents less with no kids and such. And, personally, I wish I had known my grandparents, but, you know, this is just like the engineered nostalgia that wasn't in their plan when Manifest Destiny took place, and then they had to put the census up, and then the demographic population control, and so now we have, you know, obligations that they didn't plan for, and so, but they're all meaningful to us in the end. So, it's really sad. I think it should be, unfortunately, dismantled, though, at some point in time. Um, I still believe in family, though, so I don't know. This situation is already with us more frequently than in earlier times, but it will likely grow much more severe in years to come. Thus, consider a couple today bearing only one child at, say, age 37. Some decades later, child marries and bears only one child, also at age 37. The grandparents are 74 and will, if they are lucky, see their only grandchild enter elementary school when they're 80. The They probably should not count on witnessing a confirmation or bar mitzvah, or even seeing a child graduate from elementary school. Or suppose a young couple today has just one child, and that child turns out to be one of the growing numbers of people who will have no children. Beloved to be Believed to be about 1/5 to 1/4 of young women today. Then the original couple has no grandchildren and no biological posterity. Or consider this facet in the life of an only child. When the child is an adult, he or she will have the total responsibility of caring for his or her elderly parents. A few years ago, I had a chat with Simone Veil, a former French Minister of Health and Family Affairs and President of the European Parliament. She now champions prontologist policies in France. She is the mother of 3 grown children. At the time of our conversation, none of her children had borne more than one child. Madame Veil was exasperated. They tell me they won't have, quote, they tell me they won't have any more children for the good of one child they have. Everything is so expensive, they tell me. Private school, dancing school, summer camp. I tell them, if you really want to be good at your children, get him or get her the best gift in the world. The most expensive, the most time consuming, the most long lasting. Get them a brother or sister, but they do not listen. I make no case against the one-child family. I ask only this: if that's what young people want, then make it a conscious choice. Too often, however, the one-child family is almost cavalierly imposed by situations that might have been changed by conscious action. Suppose that crying 37-year-old woman on the ABC TV program does get married. It will be difficult for her to have the time to have 2 children, even if in her dreams that's what she and her husband wanted all along. Delayed marriage, or so we have seen, is quite likely to yield one-child or zero-child families. I am not here to preach. Decisions regarding family size are perhaps the most intensely personal and most important ones we humans face. The considerations involved in concern love, marriage, economics, values, timing, and career. To only begin a long list, not everyone, by far, not everyone, has all the options, or most of the options, or sometimes any of the options regarding child rearing. childbearing. But let me address here only one issue that comes up again and again as one talks to young people these days, in the US and elsewhere in the world. It costs so much to have children, they say. It does. Career time for women is interrupted. Raising a baby is hard work. Some parents don't like being parents. Some are ambivalent about it. Larger housing quarters cost a great deal. College costs are high, even in a public colleges. And astrom- astronomical in private colleges. Oh, astronomical. Uh, for urban elites, the cost of private schools at pre-college levels can be almost as high. An Urban Institute estimate reveals that it will cost about $135,000 to raise a child from crib through college. There's only one solid rebuttal to that view. It is this: there are costs even higher for most parents in not having children. Now, this it just kind of skims over it, but like it says that like some people realize that they're ambivalent about kids and that they realize that they don't what um yeah, sometimes they don't like being parents, and that's like that goes against the whole like even coercing with money in a way that nobody notices to get people to do it, or even like saying that you're gonna miss out on something. Now, what if these people were just forced into having a family and kids? And so that's the reason that they realized they didn't want to do it, because they were told all their life that, hey, you're going to want to do this or else you're missing out. So this one little thing I feel like sort of goes against some issues in this book, like at least the emotional opinions he has when people don't have kids. You know, seems kind of, again, in my book, The Power of Beauty. You know, if, as much as it's like child mother focused, it kind of goes into not having kids. Like, you shouldn't just, you aren't, you don't have the instinct. You know, there is no mother instinct. That's what I'm trying to say. And as much as there are hormonal and like emotional shifts when you do have a kid, whether you want one or don't, that doesn't dictate the meaning of what you want at the end of the day, you know? So, anyways, that's what that book was talking about over there. I hesitate to bring it up. It is an extremely sensitive topic. It is an issue about which I believe I am on the side of the angels. Yet, if you are trying to deal with the problems associated with the birth dearth, the problem of race and ethnicity ought to be raised, no matter how sensitive the topic is. Oof. As noted on page 77, because there are more likely to be poor blacks and Hispanics have substantially higher fertility rates than whites, further recent immigrants have higher fertility rates than other Americans, at least for their first generation in residence. Moreover, the great majority of immigrants these days come from Hispanic nations, Asian nations, Muslim nations, and Black African nations. Less than 20% of legal immigrants to America today are white European stock, as he points out. To use census parlance, the rate is even less than if the illegal immigrants are counted in. There is little reason to think this will change. West European birth rates are so low these days, there's hardly anyone left to leave. Today, 80% of the current total U.S. population is of white European stock, at roughly current rates of fertility and immigration similar to those used in this volume. Demographers Leon Bouvier and Robert Gardiner have projected that by the year 2080, 1 century from now, the white European share of the U.S. population will be down from 80 to 60 and still shrinking. And say Bouvier and Gardner, if immigration rates should rise to 1 million per year, doubtful in my judgment, that share of white European stock would be under 50%. Jeez. Okay then. Um, Immigration to the U.S., The Unfinished Story by Leon Bouvier and Robert Gardner, Population Reference Bureau, 1986. Bouvier is the former vice president of the Population Reference Bureau in Washington. Gardner is research associate at the East-West Population Institute in Honolulu. I do not consider the religious here, or the mix here for several reasons. First is that reliable data is not available. The Census Bureau does not ask for a respondent's religious preference when the base time decennial census is taken. Second, it's difficult to figure out the breakpoints of religious discrimination. Much early American nativism involved Protestant distaste for Catholics. That is, that the idea that Papists would take over the country. More recently, we have heard talk about a Christian nation, which is regarded by some as an issue of Christian versus Jews. Today, we hear that America is a nation in the Judeo-Christian tradition. One could assume that the phrase implies that American citizens who are Muslim, Buddhist, and Stenotoists might not be in the American tradition, thus a split of Christian and Jews versus all others. Although this is not my sense of the meaning of the phrase or the reality of it, even that is muddled. Muslims worship the same God as Judeo-Christians, so there will be no general quantifying by religion here. Deserving of mention, however, is a somewhat separate and controversial point that is bubbling around these days and relates to the birth-dearth argument, the issue of Jewish demographics. For the last century or so, demographics believe that Jewish fertility rates have been lower than that of the U.S. population as a whole, while at the same time moving up and down in concert with the nation's total fertility rates. Thus, when the 1930s depression pushed U.S. rates down, it is estimated that Jewish fertility went down to staying below total U.S. population rates. When the baby boom was upon us, Jewish fertility rates went up, but not up as high as was the case for the rest of the country. All this makes sense. Jews in America are disproportionately likely to be college educated, well-to-do, living in urban areas. These factors generally correlate with lower fertility. Comes now the birth dearth. If the U.S. fertility rate has fallen to 1.8, where then is the Jewish FTR now? No one knows for sure, but historic logic and some estimates would put it down to 1.4 to 1.6 range. If such low rates stayed that low, a Jewish population would shrink sharply over an extended period of time. The reasonable climate would take the total American Jewish population from around 6 million today to about 3 to 4 million by the end of the next century. That's a drop somewhere between a third to a half. Admittedly, the numbers, calculations, and estimates are very complex. They involve not only fertility rates, but adjustments for intermarriage, immigration, and religious conversion to and or from Judaism. Still, anything close to a 33 to 50% drop is enormous. That idea has concerned many leaders of the American Jewish community who look at the future and see Jews making up an even smaller, less influential slice of the totality of the American life. A recent book about Jews in America, A Certain People by Charles Silberman, attempts to dismiss the idea that the number of Jews will dwindle and constitute a substantially smaller share of the American mix, drawing to some large degree on what happens in America with birth-dearth conditions under either scenario, current immigration rates or higher ones. Unpleasant as the thought may be, I think it will yield some unnecessary social turbulence, and it won't be the fault of immigrants, Hispanics, blacks, or Asians, or Muslim Americans. I do not believe that America is essentially a racist or bigoted country, anti-black, anti-racist, anti-Hispanic, or anti-Islamic. Indeed, enormous strides toward amity among the races, religions, and ethnics have been achieved in recent decades, but what's coming down the road at us demographically is asking for some extra trouble, and it is self-inflicted. The influx of Cuban immigrants to the Miami area has caused ill well between Hispanics and blacks and between non-Hispanic whites and Hispanics. Vietnamese commercial fishermen have clashed with commercial fishermen from Texas. There is anti-Arab sentiment in Detroit, Los Angeles, and New York are routinely described as third world cities, as it is not a phrase used in a complimentary way. It is true that America has absorbed tens of millions of immigrants before. There was turmoil then, even though the existing population and the new immigrants could be described as white European, despite sometimes major cultural and religious differences. This time, the cultural, linguistic, and racial differences seem even greater to many Americans. To that must be added the long-range question troubling to many of whether America will remain a nation that can continue to be characterized that is predominantly of white European extraction. So, throughout the book, if you've been listening at all, it's basically just like, it's not about the race or anything, it's finances. And then he occasionally keeps dropping, oh, but the white, but the white, but the white, but the white, but the... So, and yeah, you could just, like, be colorblind about the financial aspect of it, but I feel like that's what this book is, colorblind a little bit, when it wants to be, when it's not pointing out, oh, but the white people, but the white kids, but the white babies, you know, you'd have to be totally colorblind to not know who holds a majority of the wealth, and that's basically white people, you know, or people who are closer to being able to be called white, you know. Just saying, like, it's kind of ridiculous, and, like, I don't know what I'm trying to say here. Like, there's a word I'm missing out. Like, there's the total, like, they're dodging the actual race component of the finances, you know. I don't know if that's what this dude is trying to do, or he knows someone's reading or watching in some way, so he has to word things in a way that aren't racist or about ethnicity. Yeah. Okay.